Okay, in this tutorial we're going to talk a little bit about text, and unfortunately we have to admit that the Lightwave program has a problem, not necessarily with text but with some fonts. Some fonts are going to translate much more easily into points and polygons than others, and this isn't true of all other programs, but this is probably the Achilles heel in Lightwave. But fortunately there are ways that we can overcome this, and so what we're going to talk about basically is font repair and how to get around this issue in Lightwave. It will also cover moving around some points and lines to basically make the font more palatable. And in this particular case it becomes relevant because the font that we need for the Methodist University logo that we're playing with happens to be one of the fonts that Lightwave doesn't seem to like. So here we are on the modeler screen, and this is where we're going to make the text, and we're going to make it two-dimensional this time, just to start with, because we've used the logo tool and we saw that there were some issues there, and those weren't a problem for 3D printing, but they will be a problem for use in print and video applications. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to first of all establish what the text is going to look like. So if I hit the D key for display, we get our display mode, and I'm going to go into backdrop, and I'm going to choose the bottom left again because we're going to look at it head on, and basically I'm going to load an image, and we're going to use this one here. This version of the logo has the text in it, and I'm just going to size that so we can see this, and we're just really going to focus on the words. We've already got the tower made pretty well. Okay, so we're looking at the word Methodist, and that again is in the Minion font, and so I'm going to scoot this up a little bit because we don't necessarily have to line it up perfectly at this point. I'm going to hit the text tool, and in this particular case I'm going to go straight to numeric, which I can only access down here, and I'm going to write Methodist in all capital letters. And I'm going to hit the Z-axis, which will put the text on the Z-axis so we can see it, and right now it's below where we need to be, so I'll give it a little tap there. And as you can see, this font isn't particularly good either, but that's not necessarily a surprise. So I'm going to go ahead and select Minion, and you can see that if you look up here, we've already got some issues with it. The H looks bad, there's some problems with the E, and the O and the D are the real problems. Now we can get around some of that. If we look at the corners, if we choose buffered corners, you'll see that takes care of some of that. And that's about as good as we're going to get for now. So I'm basically going to shut this off, and we'll start with this. Turn off text. And if I move in on this a little bit, we can see what's going on. Alright, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to save this object. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. I'm just going to call it Methodist logo. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to go way up here, and I'm going to choose Send to Layout, which I have running. And if we look at layout, we can see we've got an even bigger issue here with the text. If you look at it, you'll see that the only parts of the text that are even visible are the inner part of the O and the D, so it's basically backwards. So that's the first thing we're going to deal with. The polygons are backwards. So if we go back here, how do we get that fixed? Well, first of all, we want to make sure we're being consistent. So what we're going to do is we're literally going to turn the text around, just to humor the program, so to speak. So if I go into the modify and I go into translate and I go down here to flip it, I'm going to flip that on the y-axis, and doing so obviously turns it upside down, and I'm going to then rotate it 180 degrees that way, and again 180 degrees this way. So Methodist now looks normal. Now as you can see, we lose it up here, so we can turn it around there. And that's okay if we're looking at it backwards for a few minutes. And if we go over to light wave, we can see that now it's better. The text is black, which is another problem, but at least we can see it. So it's reversed. So then we're going to go into the actual text repair. So if we look here, the first problem that we have is the O. And the O does not have the proper shape. It's chosen the inner part of the O and not the outer part of the O. So we're just going to basically rebuild the O. And there's a quick way we can do that. We're in point mode. I'm going to select all the points in the O, all of them. And I'm just going to cut them. Edit, cut. Then I'm going to go to a second layer and Control V or edit, paste. And now I got the points only. Notice that those are completely invisible. And then I'm just going to select all those points. And I'm going to go into the Create tab and make a polygon. And when I do, it almost works. If you look up here, you can see we've got a gap. And this one is a very easy one to fix. All we're going to do is we're going to go to these points here, and we're literally going to join them together. So if I select the 2 points up above there, I'm going to go into the Detail tab, and I'm going to hit Weld. And lo and behold, it's done. And I can do the same thing with these points. Weld those. And there we go. Okay, so then if we were to go into polygon mode, you can see that that lights up. We're just going to cut that, and we're going to go into the previous layer and Control V, and we've got a working O. Now the D is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, but we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to go back into point mode, just take the points from the D, edit, cut, and we're going to stick those over here, Control V. And the first thing to know about this is that going to the Make Polygon tool has some issues. One of them is that it's going to try to use all of these points, and we're going to give a little help because some of these points we obviously don't need. For example, that's a straight line. We don't need 4 points to express that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and get rid of some of these extra points. Also, if you have points that are very close together, you can just get rid of at least one of them. And there's a few over here that can probably go. And if we scoot down here to the bottom, you can see we have some issues down here. Get rid of some of these, particularly the ones that are occurring in straight lines. And those are the ones that are probably going to be the most problematic. And let's say that we then select all the points and make a polygon, and we can see that it has some issues. And you can only see a portion of it. You see that little corner there? That's the only part of this that's allowed to be visible. And that's because we have what's called impossible geometry. So to start with, you can see that this line is going there when it should be going there. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually fix that. And so We're going to start with that line. We're going to go to edge mode, click on that line itself, and then we're going to go to multiply, and we're just going to add some points. Under subdivide, add points, and we're going to drop a point right in the middle there. Then we're going to go back into point mode, select that point, and we're going to move it. So then we can approximate what that should be. Turn this around so you can get a better look at that. And once that point is approximated where it should be, we'll go ahead and weld that to that point. So if I hold down the Shift key, I go into detail, and just make a weld there. And that's getting a little bit better. Okay, so what we've done is most of the D is good. We just got some problems up here. So we're going to go and do the same thing with this one. So we're going to go into edge mode, take that line, go into multiply, add a point. I'm just going to drop one in the middle there, back into point mode, and pick it up. And notice when we do that, we get some of our geometry back. And so that one, I'm going to park right next to there. You can see now we've got almost the whole D. It reappears magically. And all we need to do is weld those together. Detail, weld, and it's getting there. So the only issue is that we've got this geometry here which isn't working, and that may end up being a little easier to fix. So we'll start with that line there because that one's the big problem, and I'll go ahead and add a point there, and then go back into point mode. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this You can see that almost does it right there. Just going to line that up with that line there. And then I'm going to try to weld these together. Detail, weld. And the only issue now seems to be this point here. So I'm just going to try to move that into a place where it doesn't bother anybody, which would be there. So if we look now, we've got our D back. And that is the best we're going to be able to do with that aspect of this. So if we go into polygon mode and we cut that polygon, and we go into there, Control V. So we're going to go into Modify, Translate, Flip on the Y-axis. and we know that it's down there somewhere, so if we rotate it around 180 degrees and we rotate it this way by the same amount, that we get it back. And then if we save the object and look at it in layout, now the O is not correct. We'll go to translate, flip it on the y-axis, rotate it by 180 degrees, and as much again here. We save the object and look at it here. Now we see that all the letters are visible, most of them are black, and we have to have these consistent, otherwise the surfaces just won't work. So there's one other step we've got to do. What we're going to do is we're going to select everything before the O. And under Detail, we're going to choose under Polygons, Set Subpatch. And then we're going to deselect these polygons, and you'll see it appears to have destroyed the polygon surface, but it really hasn't. We save the object that way, and we go over to Layout. We can see that they don't appear to exist at all, but believe it or not, that's an improvement. If we select polygons again, including that one, I hit the F key, that will flip the surfaces around. And now we can see they're all gray, which is the way they're supposed to be. Again, this is a workaround solution. It isn't ideal. And lastly, we'll take these, and under Detail, under Polygons, we'll set subpatches. And we'll hit the F key to flip it and save it. And there we go. Let's say we take the entire word now and bevel it. So if we go into Multiply, choose Bevel, I'm going to pull this up a little bit. And we can see, if we look at this in perspective view, that the faces of the letters are correct. There's a little bit of problem with the edges there, but believe it or not, that's not going to be an issue. So if we save this, and we go into here, we now see that we have a surface and three-dimensional text. So we're going to name this surface Face. And we're going to select or deselect the face surface, select everything, and then deselect that face surface again, and that will be non-face. And once we've done that, we can work with it. Now if we're in Layout, there's Methodist again. We go into the Surface Editor. I'm going to take my face and I'm going to make it green. Just kind of like a, well, that green is good enough for starters. So Methodist is in green. Now my non-face, first thing I'm going to do is make that double-sided, which is a workaround. Now we've got all of those faces correct. We can go in and flip each individual one, but this is probably the more efficient way of doing it. And so we have created the text. So now if we're back here in Modeler, there's one other thing that we can do while we're here is to just perfect how this is going to show up. Because we ultimately want to reproduce this. So if it's all in one layer now. So if we move this, we can see we can move this over here, and it's obviously not the right size. What we want to do is use this as a guide. So we're going to go ahead and size it up. And move it. And if we line the H up, we'll see that it's almost right. We can go ahead and we're going to stretch that in a little bit. Just a touch. So that the E and the T line up. Notice that the M is slightly different. That's intended. So I'm going to select just the M. And I'm going to make sure that I'm not selecting part of the other letter too. So if I got just the M, I'm going to also size that up to match the way it's supposed to be. And I'm going to move it right like that. Now notice we've got a problem there. I'm going to have to go and stretch and take some of that excess width off of it. And that will take care of that. And lastly, if we want to account for the words on the bottom, if we go back into our text tool and go to numeric, this time I will type university, also in minion on the z-axis, and there it is. Now you'll notice there's a problem with the R there, but we won't deal with that. What we will deal with is the idea that these are spread apart, because this is supposed to be basically the same thing, only about half a size but spread apart. So we're just going to kern that out a little bit. If I use the kerning tool, I can see that I can simulate that pretty good. Maybe just a little bit more. And that pretty much fits perfectly. So if I turn off text, I can then modify move and bring that, oops, select just this part here. And bring that up so that it lines up. So ultimately, this is the concept. This is what we're going for. In the next movie, we'll talk about putting it all together.